It's Friday, everyone. I'm Vineet Brach here in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Let's get to your top stories this afternoon. Well, a high-risk sex offender has been given a 29-month prison sentence for violating the conditions of his release. You might remember back in November, Rendell Hopley was under a number of court-ordered conditions when he cut off an electronic monitoring device and fled. Now, it took police 10 days to find him, and he was also given 6 months for failing to appear in court in an earlier breach of conditions. And based on time he has already served, Hopley will spend another 18 months in jail. And the hopes of a merger between the BC United and the BC Conservative Party appear to be dead. BC United leader Kevin Falcon says there has been a number of talks to avoid vote splitting, which would favor the NDP. Falcon says the parties looked at framework to avoid competing against each other, but he says ultimately Conservative leader John Rustad rejected the deal and hasn't offered a counter proposal. And in Burnaby, more below-market rentals are coming. The province, together with the Rental Protection Fund, says they have acquired an apartment complex in Burnaby to try and deal with the lack of below-market rentals in the city. So that's 56 units at the Casa Mia Apartments have now been made available.
We launched the $500 million Rental Protection Fund early last year. It aims to provide one-time capital grants to non-profit housing organizations and protect affordable rental housing from being sold to the private sector or to speculators who then increase the rents.
The fund is putting $11.8 million towards the acquisition. And changes could be coming to Canadian citizenship eligibility. The feds have introduced legislation that would expand citizenship to children born outside the country to a Canadian parent who was also born abroad. And this comes after a court order. One immigration lawyer says the changes would help reunify families.
Folks to think about raising children here, think about this place as a space for family reunification, and with that, business and opportunities and international creativity and all the great things that folks, and families and generations may be bringing in would come back to reinvest.
And to be eligible, Canadian parents must show that they have spent at least 3 years in Canada before the birth or adoption of their child. And the proposed law would automatically give citizenship rights to children born since 2009. Meanwhile, a number of Vancouver Canucks players cleaned out their lockers on Thursday and shared their thoughts on the season's end.
The next couple weeks I'll reflect and try to enjoy, some time off, and then, like I said, we'll get back to work.
I can't speak on behalf of everybody, but I hope that, that taste of the playoffs and seeing Vancouver in May and what it's like to play a Game 7, puts a hunger in a lot of guys' stomachs and shows how close we are.
But General Manager Patrick Alvin says he thinks many of the current players can bring their game to the next level. A big question now is how many can he afford to re-sign for next season? All right, well, that's it for us. I'm Vineet Brach. You're watching CBC News BC. Stay with us for more continuous updates. BC Today is up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Well, those talks between BC United and the BC Conservatives are off. Our reporter Meera Bains will join us on that first up. And the fallout continues from the London drugs data breach. The hacked information has been leaked onto the dark web. What does that mean for employees, and what happens to that personal information? We'll have two experts taking your questions. Plus, Brian Minter takes your gardening questions in half an hour. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and we're live streaming on the CBC News app. Just hit the video link there and you'll be able to watch us online. And you can go to CBC Vancouver's YouTube page as well to watch us on demand. You can call us now on our top story. What do you want to know about cyber attacks and what happens to your private information if it is hacked? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And you can also email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, first to our top story, BC United and the BC Conservatives have been engaged in talks to find some common ground during this year's provincial election campaign. But in the past hour, this announcement from BC United leader Kevin Falcon.
Unfortunately, I have to stand and tell you today that John Rustad ultimately made the decision that that's not something that he wants to proceed with, and he is going to put his personal ambitions as he views them above the best interests of the province.
So what went wrong? Well, here to tell us more is CBC's provincial affairs reporter, Meera Bains. Hi, Meera.
Hi.
Just another Friday, right?
Well, you know what? Every Friday it seems we're being hit by a news bomb, and this is no different. And how can you tell we're going into election season?
Absolutely.
Right?
Just 3 months away. All right. So Kevin Falcon did speak to media. What did he have to say?
Okay. So first of all, he said that any non-compete deal that they were discussing with the BC Conservatives is dead. And he basically laid it on the feet of John Rustad, the BC Conservative leader. He's blaming him. He said that 2 meetings took place, one on May 2nd and one on May 22nd. That was just 2 days ago. And in that time, he said the deal is off. He said the first meeting was very productive. The party set out a non-compete framework. He even released it to media, outlining—
It's a lot of detail.
Yeah, exactly. There was a lot in it. He said, you know, a lot of good work was done on it, but ultimately John Rustad rejected it. Basically, when you take a look at some of the framework, some of the details include they wouldn't merge, but they would not attack each other during the election campaign. And the parties would not run candidates against incumbent MLAs. So that means 15 seats for BC United would be protected and 2 for the BC Conservatives. But that seems really heavily weighted in BC United's favor as well. And then if both of them have a combined seat total of more than the NDP, then after the election, they would form a coalition, and the one with more seats would become the premier, and the one with less seats would become the deputy premier. And so, as I said, Falcon said that John Rustad ultimately didn't agree to those terms, and he rejected it.
Can I ask you about his tone in that press conference? What did you take from that?
Well, I think he was very decisive. And I was told, even before this news conference, that this would be the last time we're going to be hearing about this sort of deal. But it's funny, there are a lot of issues that we've been told this is the last time we're going to hear about it, but then we're hearing about it.
Still some time left. Now, in very recently, just in the last few minutes, we have received a statement from BC Conservative leader John Rustad. I'm just going to read a few lines from this statement. The first line, or the third line down, is of note. Quote, Kevin Falcon declined our offers in December 2023 to discuss a possible merger with a single message stating, and I quote, F off. Okay, a lot of animosity there. And he says time and time again, and in this offer, Kevin Falcon has demonstrated he will always put himself first and will do absolutely anything for power. And he goes on to make some more statements. And he said, as I have previously promised, the Conservative Party of BC is committed to running candidates in all 93 provincial ridings. And unlike Kevin Falcon, I intend to keep my promises. My goodness. A lot of personal animosity.
That's right. Well, you have to remember that BC United leader Kevin Falcon basically kicked out John Rustad from his party for his views on climate science. And I should mention to you that Kevin Falcon named names. He named the people who were making this backroom deal with BC United in the background. So there are actually people involved, a framework involved. So he kind of blew the lid off what was going on behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, yeah. And the fact that, you know, just late breaking, John Rustad ultimately turned it down. What does this mean for the election, do you think?
Well, it's going to be a very competitive one, and it could get, it could get quite contentious, especially with these two parties. The whole purpose of this deal would have been to create an atmosphere where they're not dividing the right, where they would be working in cooperation to get some of those votes.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if they're going to battle it out like that, it could give the BC NDP even more of a majority, right? If they're splitting the vote on the right. But Falcon clearly said his party's values don't really align with some of the BC Conservative candidates' views. And ultimately, Falcon really didn't want to look ahead to the election results because he was asked again and again about the coalition. Well, what if there are candidates for the BC Conservatives whose values you don't align with? Why would you, form a coalition with them? And he really sort of staved that off.
Okay, lots to watch for. I'm sure the NDP is watching this closely today.
Yes.
Meera, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's provincial affairs reporter, Meera Bains. 12:12 now, and on to another big BC story. Hackers have leaked the corporate data stolen from London Drugs in that cyber attack late last month. The company says there is no indication patient or customer information was breached. It did refuse to pay a ransom to the hackers that the company described as a, quote, sophisticated group of global cyber criminals. Now, it can be a scary thought to think your private data is floating around on the dark web, and you probably have questions yourself, like, what even is the dark web? You can call us now. What are your questions about cyber attacks and what happens to information once it's hacked? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. We have two experts joining us to take your calls. Mike Larson is with the BC Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. He's a president there. Also faculty with Kwantlen Polytechnic University's Criminology Department. And joining me here in studio is Roger Gale, program head of the Industrial Network Cybersecurity Program at BCIT. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Roger, to you first. So, you've had a chance to view this data, and there's, there are some that are out there being reported. We're going to stick with just that. You can describe perhaps your reaction to what you saw without getting into details.
My reaction was a little bit of shock. There's a fairly large file full of financial and human resource information. And it's somewhat scary to see that out in the public. Discipline letters, other things like that, sitting on the dark web right now.
Yes. What does it mean for the information to be sitting on the dark web?
Well, it doesn't take much to get it off the dark web and into the public domain. It's and that's what worries me the most, is that this information can easily and quickly become part of the public domain.
Mike, what concerns you most about this?
I'm concerned, obviously, about the implications for the people whose information has been breached and released. This is I can only imagine how stressful it is for individuals in that situation, but also the increasingly routine nature of this kind of breach, the level of sophistication involved, and the treatment of so many organizations and businesses as real targets of opportunity for this kind of activity.
Well, we've also had the First Nations Health Authority having to deal with a potential breach, and we've had the province, of course, talking about that as well. Is it becoming more frequent, or is it that hackers are becoming more sophisticated? Are organizations becoming complacent? What's happening?
All of the above.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yes. We know that ransomware attacks are increasing. We're also seeing attacks now on manufacturing firms and other infrastructure. And we're seeing a sophistication of the attack that is well beyond what we saw 3 years ago. The issue that I think is most important is the lack of cybersecurity control that I see in many of the organizations.
Okay. And what can be done about that, Mike? Lack of cybersecurity control from a legislative perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are guidance documents and resources that are in place both for public sector and private sector institutions. It really is incumbent upon them to take the steps to look at those documents, to implement policies, to prepare, right? Not to wait until these things happen and then respond and scramble, but to prepare and have proper protocols, in case this happens, break glass, as we have for other kinds of emergencies, and this is increasingly routinized. But I would say from the legislative perspective, BC stands out among many jurisdictions in the private sector with not having mandatory breach notification embedded in law. The Personal Information Protection Act is the act that governs businesses, nonprofit organizations in BC. And there's guidance about when people should inform individuals that information has been breached, but there isn't a requirement legislatively to do so. That's an easy thing to amend and an important step in the right direction, because it means that businesses don't have to weigh reputational implications with the importance of actually informing people about these breaches.
Okay, that was something that the new privacy commissioner raised with us as well when he spoke with us the other day. Before I go to our first question here, Roger, what is the risk then? If this information is there, it can be put into the public sphere. What I guess what's in it for the hackers? You know, the ransom here was not paid. I mean, what's in it for them?
Well, actually, the ransomers are businesses, so they pretty much had to release the information when the ransom wasn't paid. Otherwise, their reputation would be reduced, and they depend on that reputation to obtain ransoms from other organizations. When I looked at what Lockbit has done in the past year, they've ransomed a Japanese shipyard. They've ransomed Deutsche Bank. They've done the postal service in Germany. They hit a bank in England. So they've been around. London Drugs is a small player in all these organizations that they've actually ransomed in the past.
Okay, so it's about following through with the threat. And for the people, the employees, what is the risk to them then?
Their information is in the public domain. Discipline letters are out there, so employers might use that information against them if they're in an employment seeking employment. There's harassment complaints out in the public domain. There's all sorts of information there that many organizations, there's health information that's in that as well. So that's out in the public domain. Insurers, all those people are interested in that information. It's a very scary situation to me.
Let's take an email question here now. It's a good question. We're taking your calls as well. If you want to call in and ask, what are your questions about cyber attacks? What do you want to know about how to protect yourself and what happens to private information once it is hacked? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone or email us bctoday@cbc.ca. I'll put this question to you, Roger. Colleen is asking, how secure are we when so many employees are working from home? Our data on their screens are visible to their families and may be more susceptible to local and global hacking. Yes, so for people working from home.
Yeah, so we say in cybersecurity that you're only as secure as your weakest endpoint. And so if something is going to trigger an attack, then what they'll do is they'll attack the weakest endpoint. That may be a home system, maybe a home phone. And employers are having trouble with that because more people want to work from home, so they have to secure the home system, which also makes people not comfortable, because then if you start adding security on your home system, then you can't do some of the things that you would normally do at home. So it's a difficult situation to be in.
Yeah. What can employees working from home do, Mike?
Well, I think making sure that there is a compartmentalization of personal activity and business activity, having, issued devices from organizations and employers that are used for that kind of work and have the IT support and security support. This is really important. I think people working from home can also, just like anyone working, in an office as well, exercise some due diligence and discretion when it comes to receiving, for example, emails that might be phishing emails, right? To ask those questions, is this legitimate? To go through training to look for the signs of things that are looking to breach data and access systems. So those kinds of steps can be taken.
What are the signs of a phishing email? Let's lay it out there so people can take notes.
Phishing emails usually are something too good to be true, although there's more professionalism in the newer phishing emails. I received an email from Amazon that looked very valid. So what I usually do is hover over any links in the email and check to make sure that the email is from the company that says it's from. And then the other thing I really try to do is not click on links in emails. That's just something that I don't do. If someone says to me I must change my personal information or my password, then I go to the site and change my password and don't even pay attention. Yeah, not through that email. It's very important. I want to add something to what Mike said before in terms of the standards. We know that the customer information hasn't seemed to have been leaked from London Drugs. And one of the things that you have to do when you have customer information, and especially credit cards, you have to comply with payment card industry standards, which means that you have cybersecurity standards over that information already. And I think that this is part of the bigger issue, is that compliance with standards is not done by many organizations. And without that compliance, we'll see more and more breaches of this type.
Well, and when you talk about standards not being complied with, do you mean not commercial? You're talking about
there are some industry standards that we use in cybersecurity. ISO 27000 series, if anyone wants to know. But anyway, that's for your IT systems, and really that's what I'm talking about.
Got you. And we had a caller on the line. I think we've lost that call. Oh, Don is there from Vancouver. Hi, Don. What's your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can. What's your question for our experts here?
Okay. You remember, maybe your expert remembers this, that way back in the day of Tylenol, Johnson & Johnson pulled all this stuff off the shelf and said, we're going to make these bottles tamper-proof and you can't get into them. So even though they were too big to fail, they did that. Now TELUS is getting hacked. Do you think they're going to shut down the TELUS service until it gets reignited as a safe place to do business again? Not likely.
So what's your question?
And then there's this responsibility of these big companies to come forward and say, for the protection of the consumers and all concerned, we've shut our business down. I'm sorry, but we owe that as an ethical response to this. We don't want it to expand.
Right.
We don't want to take you down, and we want to stop this. We want to mitigate it now, so we're going to take a break.
Okay. And what do you want to know then?
Companies are not going to do that.
Okay. And so would you like to know what happens if companies just don't go forward with that?
You're not going to find out. They don't have to come forward.
Okay. Let me get some responses then.
So
Don, thank you.
One of the things that happened just a little while ago was MGM Grand was hacked.
Right. And
they shut down for multiple days in order to determine what happened. What was interesting about that hack is that we knew about it right away. So the Security Exchange Commission in the United States has some very tight regulations over cybersecurity incidents, and organizations must disclose. And so we saw that disclosure within 8 days, I think it was, or no, within hours actually of the attack. But it was very quick. And the same with Caesar's Palace. They were shut down too from a ransomware attack, and they had to disclose. We don't seem to have any of that legislation in BC that requires disclosure, and that bothers me a lot.
I have one quick question here by email. I'll put this to you, Mike, and I know we're really going through these. Janet asks, what's being done to track down cyber criminals?
That's a fantastic question. I mean, we have in BC, obviously, and I say this as a criminologist as well, we have an ongoing conversation, of course, about organized crime. And typically when we talk about organized crime, we're referring to gangs in BC. But, this is organized crime as well. It's international in nature. The company in question, Lockbit, has its roots in Russia, but it is a business, and it operates internationally here as well. It's a good question to put actually to thinking of, upcoming elections to potential candidates about what steps they want to take to expand our approach to organized crime to address this. Now, these kinds of activities don't really respect jurisdictions, and so you do see that Canada has its own security infrastructure and signals intelligence companies or organizations at the federal level that are supposed to be responsible for taking some of this kind of stuff on, but they're stretched pretty thin on this, and there is a requirement, I think, for places like British Columbia to really up their game and to focus on putting in place some preventative and investigative measures on this.
I really appreciate both of you. There are so many questions, and I think it's still just we are only understanding a sliver of probably what you both know about this. And so I appreciate you sharing some of your expertise with our callers here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Really appreciate it. We're going to move on in just a moment here, but very, very thankful to my guests, Mike Carter and Roger Gale. It is 12:27 now, 1:27 in the Mountain Time Zone. My apologies, Mike Larson is with the BC Freedom of Information Association. And Chris Wisniewski is a researcher at the computer security program SONAS, and he told CBC how criminals orchestrate these kinds of cyber attacks.
They have a playbook that they follow, no different than a sporting team might have a gameplay that they call. And this is very, very typical for what they do. The amount of information, the type of information, and how they try to use that information for leverage. So unfortunately, the victims are in the club of hundreds of millions of other people that have had the exact same thing happen to them. But it's not to say that it's not significant, because it obviously, people should take action to protect themselves if they believe their information's been included here. And if you're one of the employees, I think it's a rather big deal to know that criminals are actively trying to use your personal information to either, extort money from someone, to the point where they may intentionally try to hurt you if they have personal information about you. That's quite scary. And of course, they follow through on their promise to release the stolen information to warn future victims. If you don't pay, it'll be like London drugs. We're going to publish all the information we stole. So they do have a tendency to kind of follow through on their threats to make sure that they hold their reputation as good criminals that you should definitely be scared of, so that if they break into your business, that you might pay.
Chester Wisniewski is a researcher at the computer security company Sophos. And my thanks again to Mike Larson with the BC Freedom of Information and Privacy Association, and Roger Gale, program head of the Industrial Network Cybersecurity Program at BCIT. Lots more on this story on the CBC News app. If you go to the video tab on the CBC News app, you can find more CBC News on our new streaming channel 24/7. It's called CBC News BC. And Brian Minter is with us now. He'll be taking your calls in our next half hour, but Brian joins us now from Minter Country Gardens in Chilliwack. Hello, Brian.
Hi, Michelle, and great to talk to you. I know we just have a brief window here, and I think the big thing we'd like to discuss right off the top is the fact that now everybody's beginning to plant their gardens. The losses from last winter, significant right across the province, and I think the thing we want to focus on, all your planting of permanent plants, the perennials, the beautiful flowering shrubs, the trees, make sure that they're zoned for your particular area. And in many cases, we're finding that our zones weren't adequate this year. It actually, temperatures dipped a little bit lower what we normally would have. So in terms of longer term thinking, for longer term gardens and all the environmental impacts that they have, we need to be very, very cautious about the zones, the hardiness of trees and plants, and the zone we're in, so that there is a match, which is very, very important.
Yeah. What are some things that you would consider more hardy?
Well, just little things that people don't realize. When we look at rhododendrons, for example, they come in an H1, H2, H3 category in terms of hardiness. The H1s are great in the caribou. They're zone 4. And the H2s are great for the valley, Eastern Valley. We got a cold winter winds, but the H3s are not. They need to be in the Vancouver, South Surrey, Vancouver Island, the Gulf Islands areas. They're fine for that. But when you get the wrong variety in the wrong area, and as you know, in your own home, Michelle, the rhodos took a bit of a beating this year. And so it's making sure that we have the right type of plant, no matter what it is, the little things that, and ask those questions. Is it going to be hardy before you plant? And then again, the planting technique is changing as well, because for drought tolerance and all the things that we're facing every day, it's a new reality in terms of gardening. And it's just things that we can adapt to it, but we just have to be a little more thoughtful, a little more cautious. And and I think it makes us all a little bit wiser and better gardening and better stewards of the earth.
Yeah, well put, Brian. I'll ask you more about that too coming up in our next half hour. And callers are already on the line and waiting to ask their questions of Brian Minter, our gardening columnist here on the program. He joins us every 2 weeks. And our number for your questions to Brian is 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 as well. And we'll take your calls to Brian Minter coming up after the CBC News Update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Randall Hopley has been given a 29-month sentence for cutting off his electronic monitoring device and fleeing from his halfway house. The high-risk sex offender was the subject of an intense 10-day police manhunt and Canada-wide warrant back in November. His record of child sexual abuse involves several victims and dates back to the 1980s. As we've been hearing on the show, the chances of a merger between BC United and the BC Conservative Party appear to be fading. BC United leader Kevin Falcon says the two parties held a number of talks to find a way to avoid vote splitting. Falcon says the parties looked at a framework to avoid competing against each other. But he says ultimately Conservative leader John Rustad rejected the framework and hasn't offered a counter-proposal. And Restaurants Canada says an increase in the farm-level price of chicken in BC could raise costs for consumers by around 10%. The BC Chicken Marketing Board previously proposed a new pricing formula to determine the price of chicken, saying farmers were struggling with rising costs. And now the forecast on the north coast. A chance of showers this afternoon with a high of 11. Highs to 18 with a chance of showers and thunderstorms in the Peace. In the central interior, mainly cloudy with a high of 17 degrees. Highs to 18 with a bit of sunshine in the West Kootenay. Cloudy in the East Kootenay. In the southern interior, a high of 18 with a chance of showers and thunderstorms. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, highs from 11 to 14 with more showers this afternoon. That's your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
You know, I heard that about chicken prices slated to go up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do have a lot of chicken in my diet. So yeah, I was really thinking about that going, am I going to have to shift again? Because I've actually found it to be fairly affordable.
Mm-hmm.
So may have to think of some new meals. I don't know, another protein.
Vegan, maybe.
Go vegan, exactly.
Pulses.
Beans and
are
pulses.
the answer, yes.
I do love chickpeas.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe not
And
chicken,
lentils?
but chickpeas.
Good call.
Yeah. I think they call it like chick-n because it's not actually
Sure.
chicken.
Yeah, I think they do.
Yeah, and I will now. I guess I'm becoming vegan. That's the conclusion I make after that. We'll see.
It might be a good call.
Maybe we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see, and how tasty things are. People can let me know if you're happy with your vegan alternatives to chicken. I'm sure they will be.
Yeah, I mean, eat mostly vegetarian, and I don't.
Is that right?
Occasionally I eat chicken, but
Yeah.
and some fish, which of course I do in my air fryer. But
I was gonna say, do lentils work? Do pulses and lentils work?
No, I've never done
See?
that in my air fryer. Yeah, but I'm sure they would.
I'm sure they would go very well. No, I'm also a fan of black beans and chickpeas.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, we'll watch to see what happens with those chicken prices, Rob.
Sure.
Thanks so much,
You bet.
Robert Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back here with BC Today here on CBC. I'm going to check that email and see whether we have some chicken alternative emails in. BC Today at cbc.ca. You can watch us on the CBC News app. Just go to the video tab for CBC News BC. And BC Today's gardening columnist Brian Minter is here to take your questions about all things gardening. Again, our numbers are 1-800-825-5950. You can dial 604-669-3733 or hit pound 690. And Brian is back now. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Michelle. Good. And Michelle, one other part of this this whole discussion about planting trees that are in the new realities hardy for our particular area or microclimate. The other thing is many plants in our gardens right now, and I love the people who are patient. In other words, it looked like it was badly damaged and we didn't rip them out. But because now we're beginning to get warmer weather, we're finding that sprouts are coming back on rhododendrons, on azaleas. And just before we went on the air, a wonderful lady showed me a picture of her hibiscus that she had had for many years. And unfortunately, it was frozen right to the ground. But on the very bottom, there were new green shoots coming out. And I said to her, the top is gone, but let's just simply prune it back. And with the great root system that we already have, that new growth will go exceptionally fast and give us a very nice looking plant in no time at all. So patience pays off, because a lot of things we think are gone are just partially gone. And the wisdom is in terms of just simply pruning it back to the point where the plant can recover. And you would absolutely be surprised how quickly they come back to a really nice plant. So
Was she excited?
Still, Yep. And it is exciting. It's good.
It really is to see that growth right underneath there. Brian, good reminder to be patient and wait for those temperatures. Let's take a call now. Linda is joining us from Nelson. Hi, Linda.
Hi there. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for calling.
That's great. Brian, I have a couple of questions. I'd like to find out what I can do, if anything, to some of the plants that didn't bar too well, and I'm just noticing I've got maybe 20 blossoms of 20-year-old azalea on one azalea, and then maybe 5 on the other azalea. Should I give them extra fertilizer? I don't really know what happened. The rhodo seems okay, but not the azalea. And some recommendations. We took a giant cedar shrub that was over the roof out, and it's kind of taken out the lawn. I'd like recommendations on some wow factor shrubs with white flower and maybe some burgundy. I was thinking 9 bark, and there's something that's blooming around the coast right now. We were just there. It's got white flowers, a viburnum. I'm not really sure if that's what it is. I had several people guesses, but what you would recommend as something that earwigs hate.
She's looking for that wow.
Yeah. You have me up until the earwigs there, Linda. But anyway, seriously, very good question. On the azaleas, you're right. They're starting to come back right now. And don't feed them. Don't do anything. When we're not well, we don't want to be eating. Same with the plants. Just let them naturally start to come back, get stronger and stronger as new growth will come, and prune them back accordingly, because they have a whole late spring and summer period to regrow and become healthy again and get back into shape. So rather than take them out, as we talked about, keep pruning them back and get them into shape. And then when they're in full growth and looking good, that's when we want to give them the nutrient they need to recover more quickly. And generally, with most things, trees and shrubs, we're looking at slow release fertilizers, something like a 20-20-20, or 14-14-14, sorry, would be best for the slow release. Now, the one thing that I am concerned about is making sure, I think it's a viburnum marissii, you saw it down on the coast, often called the double file viburnum. They're absolutely spectacular. Now, that is pretty much a zone 5, and you're right in Creston, depending where you are, you're in that range. So double file viburnum would be absolutely wonderful there. And if you're looking to replace a cedar, I like to include some evergreen thoughts as well. And some of the beautiful tall blue junipers, Moon Shadow is one, Pencil Point. There's a number of them. If you're trying to replace a type of look, the upright junipers are great. And you're right, combining it with flowering shrubs viburnum opulus, which would be great for you. Sterile, that's the snowball viburnum, very, very good in your area. But the viburnum family is really good at giving you lots of white flowers and hardiness. And some of the dark foliage varieties, oh gosh, there's a lot of those from proven winners. The burgundy lace, the black lace varieties, and some of the golden lace varieties. They too have flowers, but they got the dramatic foliage as well. And of course, the 9 bark for you in that hardiness. All the varieties are, there's total beautiful ginger, there's black, there's yellow, there's orange. So many that where you don't have necessarily a lot of flower, you do have a lot of foliage to enjoy. So Linda, you've got a whole bunch of alternatives, and what an opportunity.
Yeah, that's exciting too, because you're at the start of something new. So to think of it that way, looking for the wow factor in Nelson. Linda, thank you for the call. Mel is next in Burnaby. Hi, Mel.
Hello. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Sure. What's your question for Brian Mincher?
Brian, I have a pink lady apple tree, and some of the leaves are going brown black along the edges.
Oh.
And it's only affecting the pink lady. I have another Liberty that's only about 25 feet away, and it doesn't seem to be getting any of this. So I'm wondering whether there's something about the pink lady or whether there's something missing in the soil that would be doing this.
Yeah, Mel, good question. And I really thank you for bringing it up, because so many people are having the same issue. We started off great in the coastal areas. In April, things leafed out. It was looking really good. Then I know we needed it, but we got a lot of rain in a hurry and cloudy gray skies. And that's where so many, not only the apples, Mel, cherry trees, the whole prunus family, the flowering cherries, the flowering plums, and that whole big group all got shot hole fungus. And with the apple trees, and Liberty, Mel, is my favorite too. It's one of the best, but it's incredibly disease resistant. Whereas the pink lady is really an Okanagan apple. It does a drier climate. It'll come out of it, but there's nothing to spray, nothing to do. What we simply need to do is wait for the nice weather to come. It will come along, and a lot of those leaves will drop off. The tree will resprout and be great. The only thing is, I hope we didn't lose too much fruit, because on the cherries, we got a lot of fruit drop with this, shot hole fungus situation and mildew fungus. But anyway, nothing to spray, just simply wait for good weather, and the tree will bounce back. It really will. I just hope you have enough apples on it, Mel.
Well, there are some apples on it, and hopefully none of them seem to have dropped yet, but...
No, that's what I'm hoping for. Yeah, that's good. Oh, one thing what happened in June, sometimes when we get out of May into June, we get suddenly a week of very, very hot weather. That's when we get our normal fruit drop on so many of our fruit trees. So just before we do get that hot weather coming at us, please soak around the drip line of the tree thoroughly and deeply with water. That'll minimize the fruit drop by at least 50%. So that's something to keep in mind, Mel.
Wow,
okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mel.
Thank you.
Good luck to you. How lucky, two apple trees that you could enjoy from. Howard is up next now in Ladner. And you have a question about a fig tree, Howard.
Yes, as it happens, this fits right in what Brian has been talking about. This is a large, decades-old Turkish fig tree. This is my friend's. I call in for my friend.
Yep.
It's a double trunk. The diameter of the trunk is probably about a foot each one of them, and so it's a very well-established tree. But it seems to have died. Now I'm hoping that I couldn't understand how a tree that mature could be killed that easily. It hadn't leafed out, and it looked like it had small buds that were, I guess, killed by that late frost that we had. And so we're wondering, is it really dead? Is it going to come back? Just recently, a few tiny leaves have started to come out, but very little. I mean, it looks very dead.
Yeah, Mel, thank you for that as well. In Ladner, it's surprising in Ladner
Howard,
because you're definitely a zone 7, Howard, and so it's really important to keep in mind that it was the way it hit, the timing of it hit, the fact that the trees were breaking dormancy a wee bit, even at the end of January, all those contributed to it looking the way it is. Happy to see new growth is coming, but I would take the bold step, Howard, of actually taking a chainsaw and pruning the tree back quite hard. I would like to scrape the stems, if you don't mind, with a knife, your fingernail. If there's green under the bark, that shows that the cambium layer is still active, still producing, water from the roots and so on. So, but I would prune the whole tree back. In doing so, you're going to encourage more new growth to come up more quickly. And out in the valley, where we've seen figs, for years they've been great. Suddenly they're almost frozen to the ground, but they come out of the bottom again and still can produce fruit the same year. So at this point, Mel, I think it's a question of how hard you prune. That's your decision. With me, I prune very, very hard to push new growth and renew the tree, and that's what I do. And I would do that probably as soon as possible.
Well, would that be I'm not a horticulturist or biologist at all. I'm getting involved because of my friend, but it's so like to cut all the sort of sub branches almost back to the main trunk.
Yep. When you do that, you think what you're redoing is simply going to take all the old branches off. Now, it's a decision depending where the new growth is coming. If it's coming halfway, then prune it back about halfway. If it's only coming about a third of the way, prune it 2/3 back so we have 1/3 left in the ground. But in doing so, Howard, and this is really important, you're going to get lots of new growth coming. Once we get hot weather, you'll be surprised how that tree will renew itself. And I think it's very important to take that bold step and do that hard pruning.
So, I mean, it's a really big tree, as I say, very substantial. You mean cut right the main trunks, like the double?
Yep.
Double.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hard decision.
And again, the bottom line is wherever you see the new growth coming, however high that is on the tree, that's where you would prune it back. And again, it could be halfway, it could be a third of the way back, depending on where the new growth coming, because that's telling you where the plant is going to renew itself. But in addition to actually, cutting it back, you're encouraging new growth from the bottom to come up, and the plant will renew itself quite nicely.
That makes so much sense. Howard, in Ladner, not a horticulturalist, but you are a helpful friend. Thanks very much for the call about your friend's fig tree. Michelle is joining us now from beautiful Qualicum Beach. Hi, Michelle.
Hi there. Sadly, I seem to have a worm and maggot infestation in my onions.
Dear.
So I've looked online. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of options. So some of them have the maggot, which is that onion fly, I believe, and some have worm. I don't know if it's wireworm. We've never had that before. But is there anything I can do to stop the spread to all my onions?
Oh, it's in your onions. Okay, that's what I was trying to find out. Yeah, and as good as our Ministry of Environment in British Columbia is in terms of doing the right things, the pest control is a provincial matter in our country, and so a lot of things have been taken off the market, which could have given you control in the past. But are the onions being eaten themselves? If you pull them up, are they being eaten themselves?
Yes, there's maggots in them. There's worms coming out of them, and the telltale is that one, sort of the left onion, one of the green parts droops over, and then the next day it's kind of brown.
So So essentially the roots are being eaten as well, and that's where you're getting in trouble. Longer range, put your onions in a different location, and really, Michelle, improve the soil quality for drainage. More of a sandy, loamy soil. The insects don't like that. They like a heavier, wet soil, so change that. In the interim, I can't send you to a garden place and to get something because we don't have anything on the domestic market that will control this. I would, however, let's make them a little uncomfortable. If you can give them a drench of a soapy water, and usually something like ivory snow is mild enough that that will make them a little uncomfortable, just minimize the damage. But in a watering can, just a small amount, and again, just whatever you feel. We're not going to do a heavy percentage, but the smallest percentage of soap, and do that about twice, about a week apart. Do it as a soil drench over top of the onions, and that at least will cause them some discomfort. But that's the one thing they do not like.
There you go. Cause some discomfort is the answer, Michelle. Thank you very much for the call from Qualicum Beach. Let's head just a little south there to Nanaimo, and Ed is on the line. Hi, Ed. Hi there, Ed. Are you there? Okay, I'm going to move on, Ed. If you're there, call us back, 1-800-825-5950. Let's head to the Okanagan, and Stuart is calling us with a question for Brian Minter. Hi, Stuart. We must be having some trouble with our phone lines right now. So I apologize for that, Stuart. And we'll try to fix our phones at the moment. But right now, let's go to an email question. And Doug is writing from Campbell River. And Doug's question is, 3 cherry trees are full of blossoms again this spring, but it looks like very few cherries. Last year, it was the same. So I got some mason bees, but it looked like they were not active in time. Is this a local or widespread problem?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. Thanks for asking it, because other folks are having the same situation. We did not have all our pollinating bees and mason bees and everything else out. The weather was inclement right when the blossoms are open. Because we have apple trees ourselves, and we're watching very carefully to see, and again, putting things like winter flowering heather under your trees. Anything that'll attract them to your particular area to get the pollination helps. But unfortunately, the weather was inclement, just at the right time that they needed to be pollinated. And so essentially, it is what it is in terms of this year. There's nothing we could have done. If you had trees lower and espaliered, of course, we could do some hand pollination ourselves. That would help to some degree. But in trees which are larger and more difficult to get at. But again, I think we need to be doing a better job of getting more pollinator-friendly perennials like winter flowering heather and early flowering perennials out to they're being attracted to our area. That's really all we can do. And it is a localized thing in terms of, that's a good question. It doesn't help because their weather changes in every area of the province. So essentially, Doug, as we say in farming, next year, keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, that's right, Doug. Thanks very much. Stuart is back now from Lake Country. Hi, Stuart.
Good afternoon. Brian, I've got something I've been told is called Irish moss is taking off our flower bed, and now it's spreading into our gravel driveway. I've been digging it out, which removes about 3/4 to an inch of soil when I do it. Is there another way of dealing with this?
Yeah, there is, Stuart. A good question. It's called Sagina is the particular name of that plant, and people do, don't get mad, but people do plant this as a, a kind of a decor in certain areas. But when we get some very, very hot weather, consistent hot weather, please go and get some sulfate of ammonia. It's 2100. That's sold in garden stores, usually in smaller packages. And just put sulfate of ammonia over top of them, because it's a great fertilizer, but also it'll just burn plants completely if you put them on without watering right away. So again, you're building up the nitrogen in your soil, which is good, but just pour it over top, and it'll put more nitrogen in soil, but it will burn the Sagina off. And if you may have to do a second application if it doesn't do a good job, but I've done it before. It saves using a pest product, a weed killer product, and it really is effective and helps things along. So 2100, I'll put it on dry when we have hot weather. That should clean it up for you, Stuart.
Thank you very much.
Good luck to you, Stuart.
Good luck.
Thank you for the call. Grace is next with a question for Brian from Davis Bay. Hi, Grace.
Hi, Michelle. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
I have a question about, well, it's sort of two-part. One's about a peach tree. We have about a 15 to 20-year-old peach tree that was planted in front of our house. Gets lots of light, now there's new rainfall coming in that direction where it never used to come before. And it has peach curl blight. I don't know what that is called. And I want to know when's the best time to get rid of it, or if it's too far gone, because a lot of the leaves are all deformed and bulbous, and it seems like even the peaches that are on it are affected.
Oh, no.
Yeah. You mentioned, Grace, great question, because a lot of people are in the same situation. You mentioned one thing, and in fact, things have changed. Two things about peach trees. Number one, they get the peach leaf curl fungus if on the West Coast we're not covering the branches. We just... in our home, only had a fence to plant a peach tree, so we built a canopy over top with fiberglass, essentially, that keeps it. And you can see all the ones under the canopy are fine. The ones outside are getting the peach curl fungus. So there's nothing you can spray now. The only way to control that a wee bit is by putting copper spray on in the autumn. As soon as the leaves fall off about mid-November, that's when you would spray copper spray. In the meantime, all is not lost. The tree will come back. It'll flush out again once we get into good weather. A little bit of cosmetic pruning, Grace, to get it tidied up a wee bit. It's not going to affect the tree long term, but it's just a big annoyance. But in the longer term, if you can figure out how we can get a little bit of canopy over top, it can make it look attractive. It's part of your landscape and so on. But that would make all the difference in the world if we continue to get these types of springs.
Ah, yes, and we just may. Grace, thank you very much. All is not lost. There you go. Marianne is our last caller at Duncan. Hi, Marianne.
Hi there, Michelle. Just one question for Brian regarding walnut husk fly. We have two walnut trees, and we've been battling this for probably the last 6 years. We have tried, I believe it's GF120. Not an easy thing to apply, but if you have any recommendations, certainly welcome them.
Thanks, Marianne.
Yeah. And again, you're right. You're answering the question. First of all, walnut trees, unfortunately, are quite large, and you're right. It's difficult to apply anything on them for this. And on our domestic market, I'm not sure the product you're talking about. It's a commercial product and not available to the home gardeners. That's really the issue. Just simply, there isn't much you can do. The good thing about walnut trees, they're big enough usually that not everything is destroyed. But the other problem with you want to keep an eye on the walnut, they do get a walnut blight later on that's going to cause the effect, and we do at least still have copper to spray for that. But for this husk fly at the present time, we just don't have anything. The only thing just in the back of my mind that is available, it's permethrin, a chrysanthemum derivative. It's sold in a product called Ambush. That could be applied. That's about the only thing I think we could find that would help you out. I'm sorry. I wish we had more alternatives for you, but try Ambush if you can get a hold of it.
You can get you try that one there, Marianne. Thank you very much for the question. Good luck to you. And Brian, thanks as always for sharing your gardening wisdom.
Oh gosh, it's so nice. And again, a reminder, leave everything in place until we see new growth. That's so important. And all the planting we're doing, make sure that we do plant plants in our particular garden and area that are going to be hardy for winter.
Brian,
thank you, Michelle.